We're glad you're here. Today we are going to jump into The Way of Kings, a full spoil discussion on this awesome book that you better have read if you're here today.
Yeah, but if you're still reading it but mostly through it, I mean, I guess that might be good enough. After all, journey before destination, right?
Ooh, there you go.
So hi there, and welcome to Fantasy for the Ages, the show where father and son sit down and talk about fantasy books. I'm the son of that equation, Zach.
And I'm the father, Jim. Glad to have you with us here today as we explore and fully discuss our thoughts on book one of Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive, his magnum opus, his biggest and best. And honestly, I can't argue about that. It is his biggest and best works.
Yeah, I'll just be fully honest and throw this out here. I don't know if we can fully explore today, just because we don't have 12 hours to sit here. I like these ones.
So a high level, full, deep discussion, something like that. While you're with us here today, we hope you'll enjoy it. And if you do, then hit that like button down below. Tell YouTube we're here that way. And if you haven't subscribed yet, we'll hope you subscribe and click that notification button. You can see when we drop more things like this. So Zach, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Glad to have AC. It's been hot still here. I'm looking forward to it cooling down a little bit. I don't like cold. I don't want it to be cold. But I'd like to be able to go for a walk with my dog without worrying about my dog dying of heat stroke.
That's a good thing, yeah. We've actually shifted unseasonably cool. Yesterday, it didn't get out of the 60s. And the last 2 weekends, we've been dealing with rain already. This is not usually our rain season.
Not yet.
Yeah, so we were supposed to have a wine concert last night. And it was postponed till tomorrow because of rain. So hopefully there won't be any rain tomorrow. Sit outside, enjoy some wine, and there'll be a food truck, and we listen to a band. You know, be a good
I'm
thing.
hopeful for you. I think it'll be okay.
Yeah, we'll hope. We'll hope. You drinking anything? You know, back in the day, we used to always be drinking booze when we did these things.
Yeah, but back in the day, we weren't doing it at 8 to 10 in the morning, depending on time zone.
Exactly, which is why I've got my coffee mug full of coffee this morning. How about you?
I've got totally not branded cola because they don't give us money.
Okay. Speaking of giving us money, I will soon have good news for our viewers because we actually have a sponsorship now. I'm not going to share the details yet because we've got a special episode coming out to introduce this in the near future.
I'm looking forward to talking about it a little bit.
Yeah. So that's just a tease, people. We've got something that we're going to be promoting through the channel because they're sponsoring us, but it's because it's also good stuff that we want to make you familiar with. But
yeah,
that's it for that right now.
We're never going to sponsor something that makes no sense.
No, we'd only sponsor something that we actually would enjoy too. And think you would. Speaking of thinking you're enjoying stuff, man, thanks for all of you who have already subscribed. We're quickly approaching 1,800 subscribers. We're just a few away as of this moment right now. So that's pretty cool. Happy to have you all with us. I have done some renovation around here.
Yeah, I noticed.
Can you tell what's new?
You at the barest minimum, there's a whole new shelf. There's more books on your screen than we've seen. Period.
You know, we're booktubers. I look at other people's booktube channels. They're full of books and shelves and stuff behind them. And I'm like, okay, I have some. I've had these Wheel of Time ones behind me for a long time. And then I've got cool things on the wall, you know. But I needed a space for more books. So I got 4 floating shelves that fit right in the corner and filled them with some of my nicest, biggest, best books to put on the shelf. So
I see you've managed to get all of the Harry Potter series on one shelf.
Barely fits. Yeah. I got the Harry Potter stuff. You see what I've got up here?
Is that Pern? Dragons of Pern books?
Here, let me spotlight myself here. Make it a little bigger.
Oh, that's a little bit better.
So I've got
Dragonrider's a
Pern
Pern up
books,
there,
but
Tolkien
I've
up
also got a
top.
couple Dragonlance things right on the edge. You can't really see that as well. Cuts off. Up on the top, I've got some Tolkien. I've got some Drizzt. I got a little
I didn't know
Simon.
you had any of that.
Oh, I do. I
I'll be
do.
honest. I didn't know you'd read any of it.
Oh, I haven't read it yet. It's on my TBR. It's on my TBR. I'll get to it. And some of Simon R. Green. It's urban fantasy, the Night Side series. I've read the first one. I gotta read more.
Down at the bottom, I see A Song of Ice and Fire,
Yep.
your favorite Stephen King, your
Yeah,
least favorite Brent Weeks.
but it's a big, beautiful book.
It is. It's a pretty book.
So yeah, there you go. I'm trying to get more legit here and have my bookshelves, and it freed up more room for books upstairs. So hey,
Yeah, give me at least like another year before I join you in nice backgroundiness, because that's probably not happening until we live somewhere else.
okay, is that in the works? So you're already thinking about?
I mean, potentially we're going to be here for another year, but beyond that, I don't know.
Okay, all right, very good. Well, we are here to talk about the Way of Kings. Shall we move into that?
Mhm.
Again, spoilers for this book, but nothing beyond this in the Stormlight Archive. There will probably be some bleed over to the rest of the Cosmere, but we'll try to keep it to where the Cosmere was at the point of the Way of Kings. And we may fumble a little, so sorry, no promises.
We'll
Most of you
fumble
watching
plenty,
this,
but not necessarily on spoilers.
yeah, most of you here with us are probably full Cosmere geeks and are happy to hear us talk about whatever we talk about. So, the Way of
Just
Kings. Oh, what you gonna
yeah,
say?
no, go ahead. Go ahead. Take us in there.
The Way of Kings was published in 2010. So that's our timeline. We're going back 14 years here today. My
That's not
story.
true.
That's not true.
It can't be true. It can't be 14 years
Sorry,
ago
dude.
that is.
You're getting old. That's what
Gross.
happens.
Gross.
I've talked about my original encounter with this book many times, so I'm going to repeat it here very quickly.
Mhm.
I bought the book when it came out. I started reading it. I got bored. I stopped, put it aside. I was only like a quarter of the way in. Then I literally forgot I hadn't finished it. I bought the second book, didn't read it because I was reading other things. I bought the third book, actually pre-ordered it. And when it came out, I started reading it. Oathbringer. And I'm like, I don't remember anything from the previous book. So I went back to start reading Words of Radiance all over again, only to realize I'd never read Words of Radiance. I went back to this book and, oh crap, this is the book I DNF'd. And then I read it again and still struggled with it, but pushed on through. It has a great finish, and I was all happy. Now, I did recently do a reread of it, which is why
Mhm.
we're together talking now.
Mhm.
It was brilliant. I loved
Yep.
every moment of it.
Yep.
I don't, well, I do understand why I struggled with it. And I'll tell anybody about this now. The fact is, this is a book that you struggle with if you don't have enough context. And I didn't have enough context. There was some of the Cosmere I hadn't read yet that aligned with
Mhm.
it, which I, of course, have done when I did the reread. And just literally having read the other 3 books that are out now, this book makes a lot more sense. And it's therefore much more enjoyable. It's like it begs to be reread.
So I hear you. I understand you. I'm glad that you've eaten your words a little bit and come back around on this book. I understand people who do struggle with this book. That being said, I think you're insane for having struggled with this book initially.
Because you did not.
It has a much slower pace initially, at least. It definitely
And there's a
takes
reason
time building through some things. There are definitely like some stories and plot lines are more interesting on a first read than others, and the ones that are less interesting are more relevant on a reread than a first read. But no, I loved this from the get-go.
Now, when did you read it, Zach?
I
'Cause you
read
held
this
off.
book. I held off and tried to read other Cosmere stuff first and kind of read it like in a timeline / publication order of Cosmere related things, and was gonna wait even longer. I was gonna wait until When the Truth comes out this December, and gonna blow through all 5, and then finally said, nope, I'm not waiting. We're going to Jordan Con. I'm starting this book. So the first time we were at Jordan Con, gosh, was that 3 years ago?
It
3.5 years ago?
2.5 years
Two and a
ago.
half years ago? Some number of years ago. And I picked it up as an audiobook first, just because that's what I was chugging through with at the time. Was doing Wheel of Time stuff through audiobooks, enjoying their narration because they're great. And they also do the ones for the Stormlight Archive. And I just blew right through it. It was a great ride. There are definitely some slow, depressing moments with certain characters. There are definitely some a little bit confusing moments. But I loved the characters. I loved the story. I loved exploring into this world. There's very little I don't love about these books. Even as I recognize some faults.
I read it on Kindle the first time. The second time I did audiobook. This does play as an audiobook very well.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say that also enhanced my enjoyment of it the second time. And I did do it at 1.2. Just that
it's a
little
long
bit
one.
faster.
It's long.
It's a big honking book.
It's got to be what, 40 plus hours?
Yep. Because it's the whole Stormlight Archive is just a sprawling, massive, epic fantasy. But each of the books is chunky, has a lot to it. And this book, there are aspects of it that are kind of slow because what it's got to establish for us is a heck of a lot of world building. Getting the setting out, introducing us to so many different characters, because one of the features of this book is that it's following multiple different characters, points of view, these perspectives. It's taking clear journeys, and we'll talk about the various ones through. But let's talk a little bit about the world building first.
Let's do it.
Okay. The planet we're on is Roshar.
Correct.
Which is, every one of Brandon Sanderson's planets in the Cosmere is unique, has its own.
One's pretty unique.
Yeah, I mean, this is a harsh ecosystem that he's created here. And the whole continent that we're on is structured around and impacted by these high storms that come periodically. They're like massive hurricanes, except there's nothing circular. They're just a storm wall that pushes through from east to west.
Correct. It's also always east to west. It is, even to a certain extent, predictable with math, and not in the same way that like meteorology is, where you read the weather, but like no, you calculate out. We know they happen so often with certain things and correlating to other stuff, at least until it starts to be less predictable.
Yeah. And there's a point of origin. They call it the origin. There's a point of origin where these storms come from. Not that anyone's traveled out there to see it. Just, okay, they all come from over there. But they start at their strongest and they get weaker as they go across the continent.
And eventually,
that's logical.
And eventually they hit big mountains, and we get the only area in this entire world that isn't dominated in how they create their culture by these high storms.
Yep. Shinovar. Now, we are primarily focused on Alethkar, the country of Alethkar and the Alethi. We have some focus on Yakaved and the people. One of the main characters, Shallan, comes from that area, and so we get some information about her back there. Your mind is trying to think.
My brain's, it's been too long, so I'm like, Yakoved's the nation. And then she goes to the other place, but what's the city place she goes to? What's it called? Nope, not in my head. Not gonna worry about it. Thank you. I was just like, something is not connecting.
The place of King Taravangian. Yes. But these are all Eastern nations. So these are places built and set up to withstand high storms. So that's one of the things I found unique about the world building, that on this part of the world, buildings are designed, cities are structured in a way so that they're not just wide open facing to the east. Everything faces west.
And
And
you put the windbreaks on the east, you build up these various walls, and it's not necessarily you always build up walls for military reasons. No, you build up walls or build your city on the side of a mountain where the wind's going to blow and you're going to be protected.
And even the plants in these areas, they withdraw when a storm comes. They suck down into the ground, and this is built up so that if anything comes by them, an animal, a person walking along, they withdraw to protect themselves. That is really unique. But you get all the way to the other end of the continent, and the high storms, when they get there, are just a little bit of a duster. It's just a blow with a little bit of drizzle, maybe. So nothing happens. And we get to learn about these other places around the continent from interludes, which really annoyed the heck out of me the first time through. And I found just fascinating now.
They didn't annoy me per se, because it's not a super uncommon thing in fantasy, at least modern fantasy, period. It happens. They were the most confusing parts of the book because they're the parts that usually require the most Cosmere context.
But the other thing the interludes do, because they're sharing different regions around the world, again, Shinovar, the Pure Lake, we're learning about not only how the land is different, how the storms are different, but how the cultures are different.
Yeah.
I mean, the Alethi, they have some weirdisms, okay? Like this
they're
whole safe
very
hand
warlike
thing,
people and stuff.
safe hand, you got to keep your one hand covered. I think it's the left hand. Got to keep your left hand covered. And other parts of the world, they don't worry about that.
No.
The bit where only women in Alethi can read and write, that's not true in other places of the world. They've got these... It's strange, and it's all part of the world building.
Diverse cultural norms in each of these places that is like, you can tell that this is a labor of love for Brandon Sanderson.
Now, the high storms. Let's touch on these just a little bit more, because they are not just storms.
No.
There's magic involved with these storms. And one of the key ways it's very quickly obvious is this whole thing about Stormlight.
He said the word.
We've got these gems, infused gemstones, okay? They have Stormlight within them. They give off light, and the light fades over time. The energy within them eases. How do you recharge them? You leave them out in a high storm. Okay, so the high storm is bringing power. Even before we learn much else about all this, we know there's some magic involved, because we also see in the opening scene, well, nearly the opening scene, we get an assassination.
Yes, the prologue.
And we get to meet the assassin in white. And the dude's using magic.
Yeah.
And what kind of magic is it? It's
hard magic,
Stormlight stuff he's using. So this is all interwoven. And so when we learn that high storms is basically where this comes from, I'm like, all right, there's something going on here.
We vibe with it. We hang out. We're like, okay, this is all connected somehow. Things are just going to explode from here.
One of the interesting things I found about the Alethis was their currency system. Now, I didn't catch if the currency system is universal across the world.
No, pretty sure no. I do think a lot of things are accepted other places and other things, but I'm pretty sure it is not exactly universal, I think.
Well, in Alethkar, of course, you've got all these bromes, and they have different names for, and the different gemstones have different values. All the different gemstones can be infused with Stormlight. But these pieces of currency, their value doesn't change whether they have Stormlight in them or not. And yet they're called dun. You're trying to pass off some dun chips to me? What's wrong with you? And it's like, they're still worth the same. It was a little puzzling to me there. People want them to be infused, but they all run out eventually.
I didn't find it too confusing on two sides of things. One, there is a little bit of an inherent value in when they are infused, simply because there are things here and there that does make use of this scientifically. Most of the time, currency, that won't matter. However, it's going to be a lot easier to make counterfeit dun spheres than it will be to make real ones.
Yeah.
Put a little bit of glass inside of a little bead instead of a gemstone. It's not going to take Stormlight, but it'll look right.
Yeah. Now, you said we're not going to be able to cover everything about the story. Absolutely true. But one last element of the world building I think is worth a shout out here, a mention, because it's so fundamental to the story, are the Shardblades and Shardplate.
Yeah. We can't talk too deep on this because we learn more about these in every book. But we can talk a little.
Yes.
About how wild they are.
Right? I mean, they're kind of like robotic armor that's made from stone, or I mean, it's hard to picture
exactly.
Shardplate
is super armor. Shardblades are the cool thing that I really need to talk about, though.
But Shardplate, it is powered by Stormlight, but not like you have to set it out and have it infused. It just naturally seems to be infused. And when it's struck, when it's hit, when it's damaged, that's how it loses Stormlight. It doesn't seem to just run out of charge. In fact, it will recharge as it heals itself. It regrows over time.
However, it takes time. It's not something like mid-combat, yeah, they've busted through your bracer.
Yeah, I'm going to do a short rest. I'll be back. No, it's not like that.
No. It's more, most of your armor got really busted up. You needed to leave it behind. You still had a gauntlet. And you take that with you, and in a month, you've got a full plate of armor again.
There's something weird going on there that can happen. Almost sounds like some spiritualness behind it. You know, there's something weird that it's gonna ooze back into being. You know, we're seeing it used in battle, and they use it not just for battle, but also dueling. We're not gonna get deep into dueling here, but
no, not this book.
When Shardplate is struck, it'll start to crack, splinter. I picture a car window that starts to, have some, it's not going to just break into little pieces and chip off, but it starts to get cracks that can start to run, and eventually it can shatter if it's bashed enough. And when that happens, these don't just shatter, those pieces disappear. They just...
It definitely takes more damage than an ordinary set of armor. You're going to be better because you're bigger, faster, stronger, heavier, but you don't necessarily feel that heavier. And it is more protective. But when we talk about more protective, one of the biggest and most important things about Shardplate is that it will protect you from shard blades.
Yeah, it'll protect you from a lot, but including shard blades. We'll talk about those again in just a moment. I got one last thing about Shardplate that I thought was fascinating, in that it molds to the wearer. It's not magic. I mean, it literally is one size fits all.
Yeah, magic items that change to their attuned creature. It's fine.
So there is something really unique and interesting, and they cannot make Shardplate. These are ancient. These have come down from time immemorial. They don't know how they were made in the past. The Shardplate that exists, you're not going to have more Shardplate ever. But now, people pass this down to others. Sometimes they win it in battle, and now it's yours. But there's only a finite number of Shardplates in existence.
That being said, that doesn't stop people from trying to make more. And there is a whole scientific part of this world about trying to harness Stormlight and different things to create these fabrials. And part of that is, what if we could make Shardplate or shields or whatever?
Yeah. Now, Shardblades, like I said, go with it. And it's not quite that they go together. Some people only have Shardplate. Some people only have a Shardblade. They're not paired specifically.
However, if you do have one, you're automatically kind of in a category of more likely to have the other as well. simply because both make you an absolute menace on a battlefield. And if you've got both of them together, the only person who's really going to stand up to you is someone else with both of them together.
We knew a character here in The Way of Kings, Sadeas, who had a set of Shardplate.
But no blade.
He wanted a blade, and he kept trying to get a blade, and his Shardplate would get too damaged before he could get to the point of being able to win and capture a blade. It's hard to get a blade. It really is. What's so unique about these Shardblades?
All right. Let's start with their effects on inanimate objects. They cut through like butter.
Ginsu knives, man. They'll go through anything and everything.
Hot knife through butter, it does not matter. It just slices right through so much that it's like, yeah, it sliced through, and this massive, like somehow very light, but 10-foot long blade slices clean through that rock wall, and it's just like a little tiny crack. Almost seamless.
So much so, you could cut a square of stone out of the wall, and now you can't get the stone out because it's so finely cut. It's still just sitting there.
In there. You would need like big suction cups.
Yes, exactly.
But that's inorganic matter. What to do with organic matter? Well, it depends. Is it alive? Assuming that organic matter is alive, and I don't recall entirely if they specified what would happen if you like chopped into a tree, but mostly because through most of this storm area, there's not really a lot of trees.
No trees.
But I have often wondered what would happen if you chopped into a tree.
I'm pretty sure I know what would happen.
Because when you slice through, things die, but they don't get cut. Well, if you slice again, then they'll get cut.
Yeah, something is cut.
But it's kind of like cutting the nervous system. But what kind of goes with it is verbiage that often seems like you're cutting away their soul. You're cutting away the piece of them that is their life force and essence. But effectively, you cut someone off at a leg, that leg is paralyzed. They have no nervous control in it at all. And if you do that in a place where you would not be able to survive without that, they die. Center torso, neck, like
their body is still physically whole, but they're gone.
But if you chop at a shoulder, just get the shoulder, the arm goes limp, but you could survive that.
Mm-hmm. I know we see an interesting use of the alive versus dead, animate versus inanimate bit in the way they go after chrysalises, gem hearts, gemstones, gem hearts,
I believe,
where they have to kill the chrysalis first. Once it's dead, now they can actually chop through it with the shard blade. But it's got to be dead. Before that, all they do is pass through it, which kills the livingness. And now they can chop. Yeah.
And I see what you're saying of like, so you know what would happen with trees, but I'm still like, but that is a creature as opposed to a plant. And we don't, that I remember, see a real interaction of like shard blade versus plant. And that does feel like a slightly different category.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in the minutia. Maybe we'll see it in Wind and Truth.
Known, yes. All right, let's move on to some of these complex characters that are involved here. I said there's 3 POVs primarily.
Yeah, because there's more than 3, but 3 primary POVs in this.
Right, we're following the stories of Kaladin Stormblessed, Dalinar Kholin, and Shallan Davar. My first time through Kaladin, I liked Kaladin's story. That seemed like the main story. Even though sometimes it's like, dude, come on. Quit being mopey boy. Come on. You have reasons, I know, but we'll come back to that. That's tied to a theme of the story. Dalinar, his was interesting. I was cool with that. Shallan just bored me the first time.
Shallan's is the one that suffers the most on a first read.
But not the second time. Oh, I just loved everything there. But yeah, these are our 3 primary foci. Let's talk about Kaladin first. Man, the world has not been kind to Kaladin.
No.
I mean, you get from early on, I mean, we learn he's a slave, but he's wrongly a slave.
And to be fair, we see Kaladin before this. We see Kaladin with a little false start in our story of, yeah, he's cool. He saves his people But then, oh no, he's getting written down. What's going to happen here? And then 5 years later, it's like, wait, what? I think it's technically like 5 months or something.
Now,
It's
this
a
is
jump.
one of the things I enjoyed about all three of these storylines and Brandon Sanderson's choice in how he tells his story. He uses a lot of flashbacks.
Mm-hmm.
So we're seeing these characters now, but in little snippets, we're getting how they became who they are now. There's a lot of mystery to this story. You don't understand why people are in their circumstances, what's going on, and he unpacks it a little at a time. Just gives you a little more, a little more. I think with Shallan, that was the most significant in this book.
Absolutely.
The reveals that you get along the way. And that just keeps growing in the next book. I have to be careful how I talk because I just finished my Words of Radiance reread.
Yeah, don't go too far into Words of Radiance.
Don't want to bleed in too much. Kaladin is the storyline that has the greatest impact on the character of these three in this book, I think, because his circumstance changes the most. Shallan's circumstance changes right at the end quite a bit too.
Yeah,
but
ultimately,
I think Kaladin's is the most changed.
I think we could say Dalinar's changes the least through this book. Like, he does change, but less than the other two. I'm hard-pressed on the Kaladin versus Shallan bit. I just think Kaladin's more obvious.
Now, Kaladin, fundamental to his character, is his hate for light eyes. Now, we haven't talked about this element of the world that's been built yet, but I think we have to now.
Yeah, fun fact, Alethkar is racist. So is a lot of other places.
Yeah, there's a built-in fundamental bigotry that you've got light eyes by birth clearly granted by the Almighty that they are better than the rest of the community who has dark eyes.
And notably, this is not like blue versus brown, though often it can be, but quite literally a like, how bright and light do your eyes look? There is a difference between a vivid light blue and a dark deep blue, and those are seen as very different standards.
And they have a very tiered society.
It's caste.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Amongst the light eyes, there's 10 levels that you can be at, if I caught that right.
Maybe. Probably.
Or was that the dark eyes that had the levels?
Regardless, light eyes and dark eyes, light eyes are always going to be seen as more than dark eyes. However, you can still be a light eyes and be less well off than other light eyes. And there are cases where a dark eyes individual is wealthy and successful, but only within like certain ways or certain professions. It's like, you're not going to see this noble with dark eyes.
Yeah. It's like, no matter how bad life sucks, if you're a light eye, you're still going, well, at least thank goodness I'm not a dark eye.
Yeah.
And there is a hard ceiling for dark eyes where you can't break past that because your eyes are dark. There's only one way you can really break past that, and that's to win a Shardblade, because your eyes will become light.
Which is wild that it's like, yeah, this seemingly genetic phenotype can change due to external factors in the world.
Yeah. So Kaladin has been heavily wronged by light eyes. We get to see his experience as a young person with Roshar, the new manor lord that came to his town, who was a scumbag. It was clear, it was obvious Roshar was sent here for some reason, like he ticked off the wrong person or something, and ends up exiled to be the new manor lord for this Timbuktu backwoods town where life had been pretty decent for Kaladin and his dad. His dad is the surgeon, the doctor of the town, fairly well-respected dark eye, a little higher in rank than anyone else in town, except the manor lord, of course. And he had a good relationship with the previous lord, but not so much with Roshar.
No.
And there are issues that happen there, which is what leads Kaladin into ending up becoming a soldier, which was a whole interesting thing we discover there. As this immature youth, he wants to run away and join the army, but he's being trained to be a surgeon. And in the end, he's finally come to peace with the fact that he's going to follow his father's path. He's going to become a surgeon. And then circumstances are mucked up by Roshar so that he ends up a soldier anyway.
Yeah.
Because of his poor younger brother.
Yeah.
Oh, man, yeah. But so Kaladin's life has sucked, and he's been screwed over by Roshar, and especially by Amaram.
Which, at the very beginning, I said we were seeing him in a battle, getting charged down by a shard bearer. Various things going on. By the end of the book, I believe we do see the conclusion to that scene. That does happen in this book, right?
Yep.
Where Kaladin wins. Kaladin
he won.
Defeats the shard bearer, wins the shards.
Yes, they're his. Under Lord Amaram, he saves Amaram's life.
And Amaram says, ha ha, you and your couple buddies who are here for this and stuff, we're going to either kill you or just sell you off into slavery, and those are mine now, and we're not going to let the true story out ever.
Well, and there's a little piece to this that is so twisted, in that Kaladin won the shards. They're his by right. Everybody knows it. And he gives them to one of his men. He doesn't want them.
No.
Why? Primarily because they'll turn his eyes light.
And he's been crossed by enough light eyes. He doesn't
want to be a light eye, a bright eye. So he gives them away. And the fact that he's not keeping them is the opening Amaram needs. And he's like, well, you're not keeping them? They're mine. And
because
we're going to get rid of
Amaram wanted to do that in the first place, but now he seems like he has legitimate reason, like he can get away with it.
Yeah. So you jump all the way to the end, where we get to the point where Kaladin has been so screwed over for so long by dark eyes, but there seems to be, or by light eyes, there seems to be one who's been a little different. Dalinar Kholin. And he is our second primary character here to talk about. The Kholins hold themselves a little differently. And it's been obvious to pretty much everybody, including all of Kaladin's group, Bridge 4, that, oh yeah, the Kholins, they're not like our guy, Sadius.
Yeah, they're still light eyes, but maybe, here's what a light eyes is supposed to be. Maybe this is an honorable light eyes.
Just maybe. Actually might mean what he says. And genuinely tries to do the right thing, not screw everybody else over. Now, Dalinar, of course, his background, there's things in his past that we get hinted at that we don't learn about yet in this book.
Not in this book.
I mean, like the one that we have no explanation of, but he has no memory of his wife. Every time someone says her name, he hears... Okay, there's something going on there. But Dalinar is the brother of the former king that we see assassinated, Gavilar. His nephew, Gavilar's son, Elukar, is now king. And Dalinar is basically right there at his side, shepherding him, supporting him.
And notably,
family holding him up.
Elukar's a little bitch.
Elukar is an overwhelmed young man. You know, he's thrust into the kingship totally unprepared. Whether he ever would have been prepared or not is another question. But he was not ready for this. He wasn't supposed to suddenly be king, and he's tried.
I'm not saying that Elukar won't grow on me as these books continue, kind of thing, or what my opinions are at this point. But when I was reading this book, nah, Elukar is not fit in any way to be king.
Now, Dalinar, he is a good man. He holds himself to honor, and he's driven in this book by visions that have been coming at him every high storm. Visions that seem to be coming to him from the Almighty, from God, giving him a mission. And the mission? Unite them. Yes. There's a disaster coming. You must prepare. You need to bring everyone together. And he's like, okay, how do I do this? We get this journey of him trying to figure out, am I going insane? Is this real? where is all this? I don't know what's going on. And finally coming to grips with, I think this is something I'm supposed to be listening to and doing something about.
And this does run into an area where there's even more world building here between religion and history, and those two things meeting each other.
Yeah.
And some of it people know, and it's cool and true. And some of it, we got to see the prologue, where the last line of defense for humanity against Armageddon's decided to retire, or at least most of them did.
Yeah, so there was a cycle, apparently, of things going very badly on Roshar, and the 10 heralds coming from somewhere else just before things would get super bad to train the people and prepare them to fight against the badness that's about to happen. Something that would be called, I think, a desolation.
Correct.
And once the desolation was over, most of the world would be in shambles, but some would still be alive. And that was because of the work of the heralds. And then their job would be done. The heralds would leave and they'd come back another time. And it was a cycle.
Like every few hundred years.
Or
and then it started becoming shorter and shorter and shorter gaps. But where we're at in our story, it's been like 1,000 or 2 years or something.
Yeah, the last desolation, the heralds basically said, peace out. We're done. I don't want to do this anymore.
Except for one who didn't get that choice, because apparently when they come back and they're helping, when they die,
they automatically go back.
They go back and have to be like tortured until someone gives up. And once one person gives up, all hell's open.
Well, I got the impression that when they go back, it's not pleasant for any of them.
Correct. No, my point is, like, they're all basically tortured there.
Yes.
And when one person gives in, the floodgates open. They don't all have to break. One breaks, and it's open. So where we're at currently is one is back there. It's been 1,000, 2,000 years since the last desolation, because that one hasn't broken. And it's the one who never had broken in the past.
Mm-hmm.
All the other 9 had broken at some point.
Ah, okay. Well, anyways, Dalinar gets these peeks into the past, different times in the past where he's learning that things they believe are true are not what they thought they were. One of those being that there were these Knights Radiant in the past who betrayed humanity. Well, there seems to be more to that. And the Knights Radiant that he's seen in his visions are something very awesome. People who definitely fought for humanity. People who held themselves to a higher standard and goal, and things that Dalinar finds very compelling. And one of the things he comes to recognize, to believe, is, maybe we need this back in some way. This is not something for us to continue to avoid. There's something bad coming. Maybe we need something like this again. Maybe we, and he's trying to piece all this together. But Dalinar's drive to unite them, leads him to realize the system that's fallen in place sucks. It's not good for anybody, because after King Gavilar died,
each other in ways that it's not very unified.
Right? The main forces, the armies, all came out to the Shattered Plains and have been at war with the Parshendi. We haven't even talked about the Parshendi. I don't think we're going to talk about it much at all today here. But
probably not today. Probably not this book.
They're at war against the Parshendi. It's been like 6 years, I think. And there's not a lot of war going on anymore. Oh, there's fighting, but it's all about gem hearts. It's about getting riches and also the practicality. The gem hearts are heavily Stormlight infused. They can use these to soulcast food and supplies and things. So, because most of them aren't growing anything out here. It's rather desolate out at the Shattered Plains. And it's just this cycle. Everyone's kind of trying to look out for themselves, and they're not really working too hard to conquer the Parshendi. And Dalinar's like, we need to change this. And it's the visions pushing him this way. This cycle is not healthy for Alethkar. It's not making any progress. We need to change this. This change leads him to try to get other High Lords to join with him and make bigger impact against the Parshendi.
Unified military efforts instead of each lord doing their own thing.
Long story short, ends up in a situation where Sadeas, basically the most powerful lord besides Dalinar, goes on a joint mission with him and screws him.
Pulls out, goes, you're trapped.
Leaves Dalinar and the Kholin forces to die. Now we got to talk just a little bit about bridges.
Bridge crew. This is brutal and awful and a really enjoyable part of the book as we see camaraderie start to build within this in a place where we didn't expect it. But we do have to acknowledge this is messed up.
Oh, yeah. So these shattered plains are basically big plateaus separated by canyons. Some of them you can practically jump across. Some of them are far too wide to get across, but many of them are just a big gap that you could lay a bridge across. In Sadeas's army, he has bridge crews, men. They're all basically slaves, prisoners, the scum of society who carry the bridges, put them down, army goes across, pick up the bridge, run faster than the army to the next chasm, put it down, army goes across, repeat. It's brutal, it's hard, and then when you get to the end, where the Parshendi are...
Yeah, it's a quick little game of chance at the end to see, did the Parshendi get here first, or did we get here first? Because if we get here first, we put it down, they go fight, they get their gem heart, we leave. If the Parshendi got here first, we're charging towards them while they're shooting us with bows and arrows to make sure we can't put the bridge down. And we have no protection. We have nothing. We're just slaves that Sadeas doesn't care about.
Bridgemen by the hordes die on one of those runs. And here's Sadeas's devious plan. It's so dark, but military strategy, I get it. I understand. And Kaladin eventually does too.
Doesn't make it okay.
No. He brings twice as many bridges as he's going to need because he knows he's going to lose a bunch of them. And that's good because if they're getting shot, his soldiers aren't. They're a distraction. They're the focus. Some of them die, other bridges get down, and his soldiers then go across. So he intentionally does not protect them, doesn't give them any armor, no shields, nothing. Makes them easy targets that the Parshendi just can't resist. Nasty.
And I think considering how messed up that is, and your statement that it makes sense, even though it's morally not okay, I need to mention what I think is the biggest theme of this book and probably series, and that is that we are supposed to question morality. And so are the characters. We're supposed to ask, what is right? What is too far? We'll talk more about that when we talk about the last POV that we're going to go through. But Kaladin has to struggle with this. Dalinar has to struggle with this.
Yeah.
And both of them ultimately in these encounters here are trying to act upon what they believe is right, even when sometimes it does hurt them.
Sadeas looks at bridge crews and goes, these are disposable people. They're all dark eyes. They all are there for reasons that prove they have less worth than other people. Thus, I can use them. I can dispose of them. It's proper. If they weren't supposed to be there, they wouldn't be there.
And unfortunately, it sounds like a relatively reasonable argument. And we have to be left to wonder, does that make it okay? We can say, no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
From the comfort of our own homes.
Now, we see Kaladin throughout the various parts of his life that we get snippets on, that one of the things that drives him is to try to protect people. That's how he ends up as a soldier in the first place, to protect his younger brother, who basically gets conscripted. And he failed at that. His younger brother dies, but he tried. And he's tried again as a slave. He tried to escape multiple times. He tried to help others escape. It never worked. Others end up getting killed in those escapes. He always ends up just back as a slave again. He is beaten down. And here he is now on a bridge crew and totally beaten down to the point where he contemplates killing himself.
Thank goodness for little wind spirit friends.
Yes, because Kaladin has connected with a little Spren. We haven't talked about that at all yet, but it's something we learn can happen now because Kaladin has a wind Spren. Her name, she's clearly a little lady.
Sylphrena.
Yeah, Syl is what we hear all the time. Syl and Kaladin have bonded in a way. They're friends. She cares for him. He cares about her.
Let's just
He
be real
remembers
here.
she's been around a long time. She's just screw around with him.
This is a moment where it's like, eventually we get to a point where we go, wait a whole, Spren can talk?
Yeah.
That's not seen to be a thing. We haven't talked about Spren, but like, you've read the book. If you're listening to this, you know what Spren are.
Yep. But this revelation, and when Kaladin decides not to kill himself, it's because he decides, what do I have to lose? I will try to help my bridge crew. I will try to make a difference. And he does. He throws himself into it, and eventually it succeeds, except it goes horribly wrong for the rest of the bridge crews that are with them on this one battle run, and it goes really badly for Sadeas's army, and that's when Kaladin is like, oh man, I now see what Sadeas's strategy was, and I just totally destroyed the strategy, which gets Kaladin hung up in a high storm.
And he lives, surprisingly.
Lives. And this is where we get a revelation, not so much by Kaladin, but by Teft, one of my favorite characters, Teft.
Teft is great.
Teft knows things about radiance.
Teft reveals that he comes from a religion, a subsect, a cult, where his parents worshipped like the Knights Radiant and talked about their return and these various things. So he knows things.
That cult
theoretically
messed up. I think it's in this book where he talks about the background.
A little, at least.
But I can't be sure. But anyways, yeah, he knows things. So he recognizes, before Kaladin does, what's going on in Kaladin. And the fact that he survives the high storm and heals from the wounds that happened is because Stormlight is healing him.
And so Teft is going, hey, maybe it is true. Maybe the Knights Radiant can return. Kaladin, I think you're a Knight Radiant.
Kaladin ends up continuing to try to help his bridge crew and just help as many as possible survive. But after this whole chaos at that battle, he decides what that means is now trying to train them all so we can escape. We're not going to be able to just survive as bridgemen. We need to leave. We need to find a way to do that.
And so this is great because they get put on the shit duty of going down into the chasms and trying to salvage things, which is incredibly dangerous for multiple reasons, including the massive chasm fiend beasts that we haven't talked about beyond the fact that they're the ones with the gem hearts.
Yeah.
And they're just like picking up sticks and weapons and things from the dead, basically.
Yep.
And he's training them how to use spears, the weapons of the poor.
Why I took time to mention all that was only really to set up the climactic part near the end. When, again, we talked about Dalinar getting screwed by Sadeas. So Dalinar and his son Adolin, who also is a shard bearer, Shardplate, they get stuck out on a plateau. They had used Sadeas's bridge crews for this run. Sadeas withdraws all the bridge crews. I just knocked my mic over.
Just smack it.
Withdraw all the bridge crews, leaving them trapped on a plateau that is too big to get away from, with all the Parshendi, and all the bridgemen are leaving. And Kaladin's crew, they stall, they dawdle with the intention that this is our opportunity. We are escaping. We're going to go now. The one hang up is we've got some of our crew back at camp and we've got to figure out how to get them out too. And as they're trying to figure out how to do this, they can't help looking back and starting to feel bad about the Kholins and all of their army that's stuck out there now.
They get slaughtered.
Kaladin is thoroughly working to try to talk himself into saying, they're light eyes, screw them. And he can't do it. So he decides, guys, Yes, we're going to try to run away. We're going to still try to do that, but we got to go help them.
It's what's right. We got to do it.
It's the right thing to do. So they do. And that scene is brilliant. And they do save them. It's amazing.
Kaladin on the down low uses some superpowers.
Yep. They get back to camp. And there's that moment. Dalinar has said, thank you. You have saved us. I will take care of you now. But Kaladin's like, yeah, light eye promises. Sure you are. Okay. They get to camp, and Dalinar tells Sadeas, these bridgemen, they're mine now. You can't have them anymore. They're mine. In fact, I want them all. I want all your bridge crews. It's like, yeah, ha, ha, ha. And he buys them with his Shardblade.
Yeah, he puts his sword where his mouth is.
Which Sadeas, we know, doesn't have one. Can't get one, wants one. He's practically drooling. You want to buy all these lousy, worthless bridgemen with your Shardblade?
It is a huge, unheard of thing. And effectively, this thing is priceless. And Sadeas can't say no.
And there's some beautiful dialogue here. Sanderson writes this really well. Kaladin basically had to pick his jaw up off the ground, reattach it. He can't believe Dalinar did this. And Kaladin says to Dalinar, a Shardblade is priceless. How could you have done this? And Dalinar says, what is the worth of a single human life? And Kaladin's like, priceless. So I gave up one thing for all of these. I think I got a pretty good deal. I paraphrased, but it's pretty awesome.
Pretty good.
Okay. That's a lot we've talked about.
All the parts of the story that you found interesting on your first read.
But, touching on those help us to understand the makeup of these two guys here. But we got to talk about Shallan now. And what happens with Shallan is in a totally different part. Kaladin and Dalinar are interacting here. There's no interaction between Shallan and them.
But it's not fully separated, because Shallan is going to try to force her way into being a 2T of
Ward
Jasnah Kholin, related to Dalinar.
Yes, Dalinar's niece, the king's sister. Jasnah is different. My take on Jasnah is she is highly intelligent. So intelligent that she has no time for the silliness of people who are below her. Pretty much. She thinks on a different level, and she's not going to put up with the nonsense of people who are stuck in lower ways.
That being said, she's also not necessarily going to put up with bothering to be kind, which is a little bit of a flaw of her. If she doesn't think that you're worth her time, she's going to let you know it.
Yeah, but she is brilliant. And Shallan wants to become her ward because Jasnah has a Soulcaster. Tell us about a Soulcaster, Zach.
So Soulcasters are these funny little scientific Stormlight devices that let you do some interesting things, most notably change one thing into another thing.
This is tied up with the religion of the world here. It's the Ardents, the faith people who control the Soulcasters. Except Jasnah has one, and she's an atheist.
Yeah, it's a little interesting. There's some fun, funky transmutation stuff happens here. We talked about how the gem hearts are used on the battlefront to be able to make grain and stuff, and that's with these Soulcasters. We hear that there's some level of it eats away at you. There's some degradation to your person in some way doing this prolonged amounts of time or something. But we're not entirely sure what that means. We learn that Shallan and her family apparently had one illegally. It broke. Shallan might be here to steal Jasnah's.
Yeah. We don't in this book get all the details on what happened, how it broke. That's actually revealed in the next book. It's not in this book. But we do know it was her father who had a Soulcaster, was using it illegally to prop up the family. Her father is now dead, and the Soulcaster is broken. and there are shady people wanting it back. So the family has been pretending that everything's fine still, that their father is still alive, trying to kind of smoke and mirrors, make it look like all is still normal, and stall, while Shallan finds a way to get in close with Jasnah. She has the broken Soulcaster. She's supposed to do a swap and then get away.
Now, this portion of the book, this storyline, is slower. It is something that intentionally tries to make you think at multiple points throughout the chapters about bigger concepts than just what's going on. It's not action-packed. Things do happen sometimes, but it's not the point of this here. But I think ultimately it's some of the most important to seeing driving motivations and viewing the rest of the story. If you use this one as the lens to see other parts, it enhances the story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we get to one of the clearest cut points of showing, hey, we need to be viewing everyone's actions of, are we okay with this? Do we think this is the right thing to do? What is the morality of the situation? When Jasnah takes Shallan for an object lesson.
Yeah. You know, Shallan is struggling with the fact that she's supposed to steal this Soulcaster because she has found herself valuing her relationship with Jasnah and actually liking Jasnah, starting to understand her and falling in love with academia. Mm-hmm. Being able to genuinely be her ward and learn from her is like a dream come true. And this is Shallan, who has been sheltered and never allowed away from home her whole life. And she's, 15, something like that. She's just a teenager in this story. But she has fallen in love with this opportunity. And now to have to throw it all away by going through with this plan, she's really struggling, not just to lose the wardship, but she likes Jasnah. She thought she was going to steal a Soulcaster from a miserable, bitter heretic. And that's not the person she's come to know. And then Jasnah does that object lesson.
Yeah, she basically goes out, makes sure that she gets mugged. Maybe their intents are even worse. And she turns around and soulcasts people into dust. And then turns around and says, yeah, I was able to do it. Does that make it right? Think on it. And walks away.
And it is very gray. You could say she murdered them. She went out with the intent to kill people. You could also say she was just in doing it. She was attacked. She defended herself. It's not her fault. She had the ability to obliterate them. They still chose to come at her with malicious intent. But Shallan's like, but you put yourself in that situation. You baited them.
So should I not have defended myself and killed them?
Jasnah's like, if I hadn't done that, someone who couldn't defend themselves would have ended up in the situation at some point, and they would have done it to her. I've made sure that won't happen now. The fact that I can help does not make it that I should help. Now, that's my argument. Jasnah doesn't use that argument. She's just saying...
She doesn't at all. She intentionally puts it out there and doesn't give an answer.
Yeah. The moral grayness of that circumstance pushes Shallan over the edge to say, hey, this is what this woman will do with the ability to soulcast. I am right to take that ability away from her.
So let's go a little bit further and introduce another character. An ardent, a scholarly person who's also kind of religious, who's not supposed to necessarily have relationships and things, but also like maybe seems kind of sweet on Shallan, and Shallan's kind of sweet on him. And
Brother Cabsal.
She's been pretty sheltered. She hasn't gotten to explore life and relationships as much as she wants, and she's loving this attention and like really diving into it. And it's like, maybe this is love.
Is this love?
And eventually, he sends her with a nice little gift.
No more.
Of some like bagels and jam for her, for Jasnah. It's gonna be a good time.
Mm-hmm. Although all along, it turns out that his mission has been to kill Jasnah.
And has just been using Shallan, but also maybe not entirely just using Shallan, because
I think he kind of liked her.
He does seem like he sends poison in to try and kill Jasnah. Jasnah doesn't take the poison, kind of sees through it. Shallan does accidentally ingest the poison, and he like seems remorseful, doesn't want to. Like, would like to cure her, but like can't.
Well, he could. He could have, except Jasnah had messed it up. Because
Exactly.
it's the bread that's poisoned. The jam is the antidote. He knows Jasnah doesn't like jam. That's why he keeps coming with bread and jam. He
Mhm.
knows that Shallan loves jam. So he's always slathering the bread, the poison bread, with the antidote jam and giving it to her so she'll be fine. But the last time they get together, whoops, he lets Jasnah check out the jam because she asks for it. And she sees through it to some degree and she soul casts the jam.
And makes it not the antidote.
No, in fact, makes it pretty inedible. But the result then is that Cabsal dies, Shallan nearly dies.
And a wild thing where Jasnah soul casts the poison out of her blood.
But this is also where the big reveal comes.
Yeah,
Because
Shallan already
Shallan had
made the
already
switch.
swapped. So Jasnah only has her broken soulcaster, and yet she still soulcasts.
Turns out, Jasnah's Soulcaster has been useless this whole time. It's not a real Fabrial, it's fake. She can just do this.
Yep.
And
She has
we
the
suddenly
ability.
have an opening into, oh, there are other kinds of these Night Radiant things, and maybe Jasnah's going to be one of them, and maybe this is open. This is weird, and Shallan's been experiencing other weird things too, and this world is opening up, and Jasnah made the choice to save Shallan, didn't have to, and in a certain sense, they bind themselves together with the secrets that they are holding and the interest that they have in this subject, and move forward disregarding kind of previous mission.
It's a good scene, though, where Shallan is the one who has the revelation. She realizes, wait a second, Jasnah soulcasted. She's got secrets here. You know, because Shallan's being dismissed. You tried to be my ward, but you lied to me. I'm gonna send you home. And Shallan goes to her late at night in her nightgown and says, wait a second, woman, and calls her
No,
out on the carpet. I know what you've done. I know who you are. I can do it too. I think we have something we need to stick together because of, and you're going to want me by your side. She doesn't exactly blackmail her, but she kind of implies, I know your secrets, and you need me with you because you need someone who you can truly be honest about. With the stuff we're talking about and with the important things you've been researching, I can be that person. Do not send me away.
and even more to Jasnah's credit, her response is more or less, took you long enough. I've been waiting to see if you were worth being the person that you're trying to be. Duh, let's do it.
Yeah. So we've got Shallan, who clearly has abilities now. Jasnah has abilities. Kaladin has abilities. These things are popping up in different places. More is to come. That's what we get from the Way of Kings. More is to come. It's so much foundational building. While we do get a couple of key stories, the story of Kaladin, a little bit of the story of Dalinar, the story of Shallan.
And we get other characters that we enjoy and love. You already mentioned Adolin. We haven't mentioned Wit at all. We haven't mentioned most of the other Bridge 4 members. I
Great
love
characters.
Brock. Not a huge fan of the Lopin.
I love the Lopin.
I think the Lopin is just like okay, and it is an example of Brandon Sanderson trying to be funny.
He is funny.
And he's just like, it's okay.
Lopin and his cousins. I got a cousin. I know a cousin. It's like I know a guy.
To me, it's like this is a humorous character. Yes, this is not a fun. Like his jokes aren't usually funny.
Depends,
but
on
he is
your
humorous.
Let's move into talking about some of the key themes of the book.
Yeah,
I think you already were referencing one.
was going into kind of the question of morality and what that means, but then taking that a step further to be a little bit on the nose, most of our characters are looking at how do they perceive honor in their lives.
Yeah. So the novel is definitely exploring, what does honor mean? How important is honor? What brings you honor? And tying into that also leadership. We've got people who are in charge, and how do they use that? What responsibility does that bring? Do they have responsibility when they are in a leadership role, or is it all about them? Is honor gained by increasing your wealth and your power, or is honor gained by being a leader who cares for those who follow, who supports and protects? These are some real things that both Kaladin and Dalinar spend time struggling with, and we get the contrast in seeing Sadeas's perspective on leadership and a little bit of Elokar, just a little. Honor, to really act with honor, comes with a cost.
Sometimes.
There is emphasis in here, I think, as one of the themes. Doing the right thing regardless of the cost is what you need to do if you are a man of honor, a person of honor.
One thing that I appreciate about this series is that it very clearly, already in this first book, shows a good versus evil story. We have an idea of there will be a good versus evil story. Classic. But it makes a point to say that good and evil is not necessarily 100%.
Oh,
good,
totally.
The side of good can have bad guys.
We have not met anyone in this story who views themselves as a bad guy. They're all good guys. They all believe they're doing what is right. Every last one of them. When Sadeas betrays Dalinar out there on the Shattered Plains, he believes that was the right thing to do. Basically, I'm putting Dalinar down.
Dalinar is an old dog clinging to old ways,
I'm letting him go out as a warrior,
ruining our nation,
giving him a good death. It's the best thing. Yeah.
Now it's also the best thing for Sadeas.
It happens to be a nice coincidence,
but it is a position where Sadeas, as much as I hate the guy, isn't purely doing this selfishly.
Yeah. The other major theme that really jumped out, and I caught this the first time through, and it was even more so prominent on the second time, is mental health and trauma, and the impact trauma has on you in an ongoing manner.
I mean, all three of our main POV characters struggle with things, and struggle with different things. Some of them we know more about than others. Two of the three, not Kaladin, seem to be struggling with some form of repression, like repressing those traumas and memories and things in some way, shape, or form. Kaladin is severely depressed, partially by circumstance, and partially you can see this goes beyond just how shitty his circumstances are.
Just when the rainy season pulls in and he gets in the doldrums and he knows it's going to happen.
He gets seasonal affective disorder as well.
He does. Yeah. Yeah. And how they try to struggle through what they deal with. It's not like they can just fix themselves. It doesn't work like that. And that's genuine to mental health issues.
Now, it is a valid complaint to say that this may or may not connect with a experience that a reader has with their own mental health struggles or journey. Brandon Sanderson is writing things that he may not himself fully experience, may not fully understand, but that's kind of what authors do. You write what you know, but you extrapolate what you don't. And I think he does a pretty good job of trying to illustrate these things in a meaningful but relatively respectful manner.
Yeah, I think he shows real sensitivity, writes these characters in a nuanced way where it's not just a cheap ploy to tell the story. He's actually trying to build these into the fabric of the characters and show how they struggle. It doesn't make them less than others. It just makes them different than others, that they have this, whether it's depression, whether it's past repressed trauma, it's something that's part of them and they have to work through it. But he doesn't do it disrespectfully at all. It's just tries to be very genuine, I think.
In my opinion, one of the biggest compliments that his writing of these situations and characters gets is that some people's biggest complaint about the book and Kaladin is that he's whiny, that he's just complaining, he needs to just suck it up. And to me, that's a huge compliment to the writing, because in the real world,
that's how people treat people who are depressed. Yeah,
who aren't depressed look at people who are depressed and say that.
Yeah,
so I'm like, it's not that simple. it's not just he can choose this. It is harder to overcome than that.
Yep.
And I think it's really fun to see that in the dialogue about these books. And I just look at someone who says that and go, I think you might be missing the point a little bit.
Right. All right, let's move on. We've got a few more key things I really want to hit on. And we're trying not to go 12 hours, like you said. But we've got to touch a little bit more on the magic systems. Okay. Kaladin discovers, of course, that he can do things. Okay, he's got some abilities here. And we also saw right in the prologue that the assassin in white can do things. Okay. And the doing things they're doing is Surgebinding.
And we get explained some of that through Jasnah and Shallan as they talk about this a little bit. Different kinds of Surgebinding, different orders of Knights Radiant that could do different Surgebinding.
We're going to learn more about Surgebinding as we move through the series. But here, at least, we get enough to understand that basically, in some way, the magic allows people to change, to mess with the forces of nature, specifically gravity and pressure. We see more of the gravity here, but a little bit with pressure. To perform things that look supernatural, but really it's kind of scientific the way the magic is working.
Well, we also see clear examples of transmutation.
That's not Surgebinding. That's something different.
Kind of.
I don't think that is.
Yeah, it is.
Surgebinding?
100%. Maybe I have a term incorrect here, but Brandon Sanderson is famous for putting in his glossaries and his Ars Arcanums, and they're great resources. And you go to the back of any of the Stormlight Archive books, start with the Way of Kings, and you get this wonderful table that's showing like 10 elements as they're understood in this, and we can kind of see them as 10 fundamental forces of nature in the universe. And what we kind of see through learning some of this is that some people somehow, some way, can use Stormlight to affect one or more of those fundamental forces of the universe. And I think it is in this book that Jasnah explains different orders of Knight Radiant have access to 2 different ones. There's overlap, but no one is going to get all of them.
Right, but they're going to get 2. Yeah. So we get to see Kaladin's initial learning about what he can do. Some of this he had been doing intuitively. And now he's figuring out how to actually use it a little bit. The scene where he runs and jumps up at a wall, boom, and falls on his butt was hilarious. But, trial and error, trying to figure this stuff out.
You gotta try it.
The other part of the magic that's there right from the get-go, but we learn much more as we go, are Spren. And we talked about Spren a little bit when we talked about Sylphrena, but there are more Spren. Most of them seem to be pretty mindless, little flickers of magic all over the place.
They're just like little spirits of objects or ideas or things that gravitate towards that thing or idea or whatever. And sometimes you can see them and sometimes you can't. And some people like Rock can just see them like all the time.
Yes. Syl has more cognizance than most of the Spren that are around. And we come to learn from her that knowledge, that awareness is coming to her through her connection to Kaladin.
It's like, she's like, I didn't used to have this, but I do now. And every day I feel like I have more of it. And then I'm like, well, maybe I had it once before too, but I don't really remember that. But maybe I will in the future.
Right. So this bond, through that, we learn some of these things about Spren from Syl herself as she's kind of remembering things. So one of the things we learn is that Spren aren't really like life forms like we are. They're concepts given lifelike ability through their relationships with humans.
It's an amazing thing that I love. And I'm going to go a step further. Through their relationships with sapient individuals. Doesn't have to necessarily be humans.
Okay.
But the idea being creatures that have sapience who have understanding and give identity through their understanding of things within the dialectic between the individual and the object, basically, there's an understanding of identity, and that births Spren.
And certain Spren can form bonds with humans, and that's where the Surgebinding abilities come from. So the Spren gain strength, awareness, sense of self from a bond with a human. The human gains ability to use magic. That's basically what's happening there.
Now, whether that is entirely true or not to the series, you'll have to keep reading to find out if you've only read this book, but that is at least the understanding that we are given in this book.
Yes. And we'll keep exploring, but there's one other aspect to Spren that we get just a splash of in this book. And we get it through Shallan's storyline with Jasnah. And that is that Spren, what we see of Spren, yeah, they have a different place where they come from and where they look quite different, called Shadesmar. We see Shallan end up in Shadesmar, and Jasnah has to save her.
Pull her out of it.
We get just some academic talk between them about it, but nothing more. More is to come. More is to come as you move through the series.
We can generally say there is a place of ideas, and it is a real place of ideas.
Yeah. I think I want to wrap up just by kind of a final emphasis on why this book is hard for some people is it's doing a lot of setup for the rest of the series.
Absolutely.
There are some long-term story arcs here that we just are establishing. And there's a ton of foreshadowing that you don't understand what's going on yet. But as you keep reading through the series, I mean, there are so many things about Shallan's storyline that are foreshadowed here that we're just not getting enough yet. But it's rich, and the book lays a huge groundwork for future conflicts, for other character developments. There are things about Renarin, for example, that are the foreshadowing, the hints that are here that really not much energy is given to. They happen, but they're important, but you don't barely even notice them yet. Elokar, same thing. There's some stuff there.
If you approach this book with the desire and intent to read the series, or with an already interest in the Cosmere, you're already reading the Cosmere, you want to go further, and you know you're going to go further regardless of how you feel about this book, then you will love this book. If you approach this book with little to no Cosmere knowledge, and you're trying the series because people have told you it's good, and you're not sure if you're going to go past the first book, but you're going to give the first book a try, you might DNF the first book and not like it, simply because it needs that forward-looking perspective to look forward to what is to come, I think.
I mean, the novel is rich in mythology, references to the past. There are characters in this book who don't come from this book.
Yeah.
And it's tying to other aspects of the Cosmere. And yeah, if you've read more, you might get some of that. If you haven't, you're not making the connections. You're not understanding. It's true. Okay. I think that's about all. I mean, we didn't want to summarize the whole book. We talked about some of the major key points. There's a lot we haven't, but I think we've covered the main crux of what's significant about the Way of Kings and why we like it.
I think I can live with an hour and a half for the first time we've talked about this series, really.
We will have to schedule our Words of Radiance talk soon, since I read that. I haven't started Oathbringer because I'm going back and forth with Mark Lawrence's Book of the Ancestor on these. So I'm now reading my second book of that, but those are shorter.
But you'll get there.
I will.
And then through the next one before Wind and Truth comes out.
I will be ready. I will be ready. Okay, let's wrap. Any last words, Zach?
Nah.
I'm waiting for you to go, peanut butter.
I was maybe going to go like some meaningful route down like a Night Radiant, say the first oath or something. And then I was just like, no, that's tacky. I'm not going there today.
All right. Thanks for watching, everyone. Again, if you enjoyed it, hit that like button and we'd value your subscribe. Thanks for being here. Put your comments down in the comment box. We value seeing them. We will reply. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time.